All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our uh, last session on the access to experts in the winter intersession Career Development Academy. Very happy to have joining us today, Justin Jacob. And Justin is a PhD graduate from our program, 2019, has had a lot of roles within the public sector space after graduating. But just fortunate to have you here to be able to talk a little bit about kind of what you've done and things like that. So let me, before we get going, just get the slides up here to share on the screen. And oh,
yep, I can see them. Cool.
Perfect. All right. So I'll start with Justin. If you could just introduce yourself to the people on the call.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin Jacob. As Paul mentioned, I graduated from the school in 2019 with the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology with a PhD degree. Since then, I've had technically 4 jobs, and I think we can get more into the details then when we get into the questions. I loved my time at the school. I was there from 2012 to 2019. I participated not only within the department, but school-wide, being on several different student groups, student assembly, and the like. So I really had a great time interacting with Paul and other people in the career services team, but also just throughout the school. So that's a quick bio about me.
Yeah. And again, this is where I know Justin really well. I mean, he was definitely very involved in all the various student governance going on at the school and student assembly. Was definitely in our suite very often, talking to the various people there. So Justin knows the school really well and knows the true experience of what it's like to be at Bloomberg. So very happy to have you join us here today.
Great.
Awesome. Well, let's go kind of right into some of these questions here. So can you just elaborate for the folks here just what your transition has been like from graduating, finishing up in Bloomberg from the first job, and then kind of beyond from there as well?
Yeah. So this is where I get into the details. So I've had different experiences, I guess, within the public health kind of realm. I guess when I graduated in June, when I left the school in June 2019, I started a contractor position. It's funny because I just put I think I set up a profile on ZipRecruiter, one of those kind of types of platforms. I can't remember exactly, but that's how I got contacted, actually. Just randomly cold contacted, and the person said, "Hey, do you want a contractor gig in the DC government?" And I said, "Sure, I'll hear more about this." At the time I was looking to transitioning. I guess within our program, you can graduate and then, sometimes you might stay for a couple months to, wrap up some projects in the lab. And then that's kind of how it happened with me when I was at school. So I was, kind of casual, I was kind of more actively looking for things. So this one just kind of fell in my lap, and they said, "Oh, you can have one of these 2 jobs. One pays $25 an hour. The other pays $40 an hour." They asked me, "Which one do I want?" I said, "I'll take the $40 an hour one." So, I kind of, and then they set up an interview, and it was just a contractor thing. They said it probably would be a couple months. There's nothing guaranteed after the fiscal year. And I said, this is a good transition period for me, because actually at that time I was looking to do a postdoc. And I was applying, and I was interviewing already at that time for a postdoc at the NIH. So I was probably going to do that. And it was good to, kind of start something new and before I started my postdoc. So I got this contractor as a contractor position at the DC Department of Forensic Sciences, but specifically I did it wasn't really forensic science work that I was doing. I was actually in their public health lab division. It's interesting how that the agency is kind of set up, but either way, I was in the public health lab part of it, and I was doing clinical toxicology, and a lot of it was emergency response for chemical terrorism. There was also kind of a drug monitoring program, but that was to help efforts by the Department of Behavioral Health. Kind of nothing, not punitive. It was more for assisting, with the programs that they had there. Yeah. So that was my 3 to 4 month contractor job, and it somehow it worked out where I ended up getting it renewed for a couple months, and then I actually applied for a supervisor position also within that same team, and it's a clinical toxicology unit.
Mhm.
And then I got the supervisor position, and I started that in March of 2020.
Oh,
so,
wow.
so, uh, so March 2020, a lot of us know what happened then between March and
Yep.
April. There's something that started a pandemic, and
Yeah.
I ended up not really doing the primary responsibilities of the job that I was hired for at all, because they had me pivot to doing a lot of the COVID sampling, testing, that whole response effort. And that was an opportunity that I've never had before. I never had a really public facing part, because I mean, being in a lab, most of, after, undergrad and all the way to end of grad school, I was always at a lab bench, never really communicating with like the public or with
Right.
people. It's like, it's
Mhm.
really, people in the lab, that was it. And it was like so different. Like they deployed me to hospital parking lots in like MedStar parking lot, where like the whole back lot was just vacant, and all you can see are like National Guardsmen with the Humvees and everything. And like it was kind of like a scary time. It's like
Kind of like you're in a movie or something like that.
it felt like the movie. What was that movie? Contagion. With
Contagion, yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
It felt straight up right out of that movie, and I just couldn't believe it. You could see, you're seeing people in their cars, driving up to get sampled, so we can eventually collect their sample, send it to the lab, and we would test it there. And like I just, I could see the emotions on people's faces, and I've never really, I've never been, never really experienced that. So
Mhm.
like I thought that was an experience, that I've, that I really, one thing I will never forget is one of the people in the cars. He was he seemed like he was probably around my age, and he just looked very worried, very anxious before he was going to get sampled, because who knows, if he received a positive result or not, like what would that mean, and I never really experienced that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So in many ways, that was the first time, like, well, not the first time, but a very tangible way to kind of see, the work kind of firsthand, at a, very much in your face kind of level of doing the public health work.
Absolutely, Paul. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just because when I was doing my thesis at the school, like we could say, I mean, I was like, yeah, it's related to cancer research, but it was so far removed.
Yeah.
Like it's very basic science is what I did, and this was a completely different experience. And yeah, that was my first public health job.
Got it.
Afterwards, I mean, I guess you said and beyond. Do you want me to go to the and beyond
Well,
part?
so I'm going to jump to
Okay, that's fine.
there's this one here. So part of the phrasing of my question here is actually, and you can get into the bit about it. So just knowing what your background is, starting at DC government, and then you can talk about your time in the federal government, and then going back to the DC government. So I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, how did you handle those transitions? Were they intentional, or were they by accident? So maybe you can just kind of add that to kind of the next parts that you're going to talk about in terms
That's
of
good.
the transitions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good segue. I like that. Good. Okay,
Yeah.
so I would say that a lot of my decisions eventually became intentional, I guess, because I made the
Okay.
decision. But a
Sure.
lot of these, I never really had like a plan, like what I wanted, like in the sense that I want this kind of job, because
Mhm.
my I don't know, like throughout grad school, I kind of changed whether, the beginning I said, oh, I want to go into government. In between, I was like, oh, actually, I like teaching a lot. I kind of want to be maybe a lecturer at an institution, And
Mhm.
then towards the end, I'm like, I'm really enjoying this research thing. I kind of want to be a faculty maybe, it's like,
Right.
this is great,
Yeah.
So like I changed my mind a lot, and you could see that like on a whim, I took that contractor position while I was, kind of, prepping for my potential postdoc
Right.
route. But, kind of, as you were saying, it was, eventually obviously made the decisions that I made, but a lot of those, kind of those opportunities, were kind of, it just kind of were accident. I wasn't looking for the contractor position at DC government.
Right.
When I was when I got the promotion at DC government to, and then started doing a lot of COVID related work. I wasn't looking for jobs outside, at all. I was doing the job. I was having a great time with the people that I was working with, and I found that work very meaningful. But during that time, I was, during that time, we're using medical devices. These are in vitro diagnostic devices for the testing. Basically, the reason why that's relevant is because you can, like, these devices were kind of approved. They call them EUAs from the FDA. It's the emergency use authorization. So I can see like these things kind of evolving in real time as they're, being used in the field, like we were using it in the field. And then, the companies are kind of revising their instructions for use, their labeling, given feedback from the users and, whatever that may be. And I said, that could be kind of cool to be on the other side of the FDA asking the questions, but I never was looking for a job at the FDA, I was just like, but I happened to get a message on Facebook from one of my former tennis buddies, in high school. And he said, they're looking for a toxicologist in the respiratory medical devices team. You interested? And I said, sure, I'll come out and talk to people. Why not? So I went. I was more of like an informational interview. So this was probably, I was probably actually I probably did that interview at the same time that I was interviewing for the promotion that I got at DC government. But the way the federal government worked, it took a long time. So I probably interviewed with them in maybe February of 2020. And I eventually got the job with them in, oh boy, when did I start? Hold up, I'm sorry. January of 2020. So I got the job, sorry, January 2021.
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
So it was about 10 to 11 months later. But that's when I started. But I think I got the job maybe in September or October, and I delayed the start date accordingly. But so it took time. But then so I started at the FDA January 2021. I was there for about a year and a half, and I was a scientific reviewer. So they call it a lead reviewer. So basically what we did was we kind of had different projects, and each project was like a separate submission or an application for a medical device that a company wants to, market. And there are different types of there are different types of submissions, and each of those submissions have different types of review timelines, milestones, and whatnot. And with each of the submissions, you have a different team of subject matter experts. So it's like you're kind of herding the cats in each different one, Right. And so that was so the question that you were saying here, how did I handle that job transition from DC government to the federal at the Food and Drug Administration? At first, well, actually, it was very different. Like, I've never really been in the regulatory world. I was in academia, when you're asking, like, when you're listening to a presentation or like reviewing data and whatever, you can ask academic questions, it'd be nice if, but it doesn't, that's not the FDA. You can't, it's like, you have to ask questions that are very pointed.
I would say very practical, not theoretical.
It's like, what are they? It's all about like least burdensome, like you can't be asking these fun academic questions because that's going to make the people on the other side in industry kind of annoyed. But, but yeah, so it was a culture shock, and I learned a lot about a part of the world that I never thought about before. And it was very enlightening. And I took a lot from that experience, but it was, like I said, it was a difficult transition. And, even like a year and a half, maybe a little over a year and a half while I was there, I still had so much more to learn to be an expert at that job, like there's so much with regulations, different policies, guidances, and then you have internationally recognized standards that you have to kind of be familiar with. Because not only was I a lead reviewer, I was also a consultant reviewer for medical device biocompatibility. That has a whole different set of standards that, kind of prescribe more, not prescribe, but it kind of guide how companies should be testing their medical device to demonstrate that it can be biocompatible within a human patient.
Right.
So that was at the FDA. And then, as you mentioned, I transitioned from the FDA to actually the same agency that I started out at in DC government. Same Same unit too, except I went a step higher now. Now I'm a unit chief.
Yeah.
So it's and this transition actually was much more seamless. I'm already familiar with, how things are kind of done. I already had an idea of how to kind of make things, better, or just, look at things in a different way and
Yep.
present that to the group and see how they get their buy-in. I knew people there, already. So it's
Mhm.
like, it was a very seamless transition. And
Right.
my only thing I think that I love, and I also love being in person, because I didn't mention before at the FDA, it was all work from home, all remote
Right.
work.
Right.
And that was particularly tough on me. Even like,
Mhm.
I would describe myself as an introvert now, but like working from home, I enjoy working with people.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that was what was challenging while I was at the FDA. But when I
Yeah.
came back to DC government, now I'm working with people. We're
Right.
looking at data together. I bought a projector for the office and home, obviously, but and then I just project onto the office wall, and we're just reviewing either documents, data, whatever it may be, and then people are drawing on the iPad when they're trying to make an illustrative point. It was just a very different way of doing things that,
Wow.
I've never, and it was all kind of done on a whim. I didn't have a plan to do it. I was like, that would be kind of interesting to try. So I bought a projector, and then, it's like,
Okay.
and it was,
Okay.
very well received. And that's, I have people in the office almost every day, and we're using that projector and going through things together. So
That's
anyway,
great. That's great.
yep.
I guess was the transition going from FDA back to DC, was that again by accident or intentional, or it was, that like what was your thinking at that stage?
Yeah, I didn't address that. So working at the FDA, to me, was actually, so I think FDA might have been the hardest job that I've ever had.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
But it could have been because of the team that I was on, because we were doing respiratory medical devices. So not only do we have the regular devices, but we also have everything kind of related to COVID, so our workload was crazy high. Like, I think I was, easily I had 15 plus different types of submissions in my queue at a time.
Mm.
And that doesn't really, if you're not in the world, you may not really, it's a lot. Okay. but, but anyway, yeah, it was a really tough experience. I was kind of at that point, it was, I was itching to go back into the lab as well. I missed the lab. I think I left the lab too early in my career.
Mm.
And I think going back to the FDA is very much in the cards, but I think for me, I felt like my actual training and expertise wasn't being utilized to its full potential while I was there.
Got it.
Because I was and nothing against engineers, it's just medical devices and engineering, that makes more sense. I was
Yeah.
a biologist. I was doing some biocompatibility reviewing, but I would have rather been, with my expertise, it would have made more sense for me to be in like in vitro diagnostics or in the biologics world, even
Mhm.
maybe even drugs. I'm not sure, but I think maybe later in my career, it's very much in the cards for me to go back. But I was, like, to answer your question, I was looking for a transition at that time. That was intentional for a
Got
couple
it.
months after the year and a half month mark I guess a year and a half mark at the FDA. I was like, yeah, I think I need to find something. And
Got it.
throughout my time there, actually, because I kept really good contacts with people at the DC government, they were saying, hey, you're interested in this job to come back? You're interested in this job to come back? How about this one? And then they're like,
Yeah.
hey, your former boss actually is transitioning out. Do you want to take his role? I'm like, that sounds like something maybe I could
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
get.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also, I really, the new leadership, I had not saying anything against the previous leadership, but I really jived with the new leadership in the DC government, at least like the director, deputy director, and how we wanted to kind of move the program forward. We kind of want, obviously it's a government, it's a government entity and a government lab, but we want to kind of treat it, at least the people there, kind of treat it like kind of in an academic kind of way,
Mhm.
like, I don't know if that makes, like, just kind of, even when it comes to training and mentorship, we saw eye to eye with that kind of, that kind of vision. And that was, for me, I think that's like the best of all worlds for me,
Right.
like academia, a little bit of academia, a little bit of government,
Yeah.
and it was the right move. Yeah,
Great.
for me.
So let's see. I want to go back here. All right, so let's go. I'm going to go to question 3, and then I'm going to go to question 2. So question 3, what do you like the most about the current work that you're doing? And then what do you like the least about the current work that you're doing?
Yeah. And so I've only been in this job for about 3 or 4 months. So there's an asterisk, I guess, basically because of that.
Sure. Yep.
What I like the most is, so I guess this is maybe my experience when it comes to local versus federal government. I feel like I'm able to have much more of an impact, at the local level, like I can have ideas and I could probably run with them, with enough support, evidence, whatever. And they let me be creative, and it's kind of cool. Like I can look at data in different ways, in ways that, we never looked at it before when I was previously here, so I really like that. I get to be, it's kind of, I get to play around with that academic part in my brain where I can really be curious and, and kind of run with ideas. What do I like the least? Why am I blanking? I think it's,
I mean, you don't have to answer it. I mean, it could be that it's, it's going so well for you, but yeah.
I mean, I think what what was challenging when I first started is I was getting into a unit that didn't have a manager for like 6 or 7 months. So kind of playing catch up with a lot of stuff. Luckily, I knew a lot of the terminology, the processes and whatnot. But I can't imagine if I didn't. Like I was like, "Hey, go!" And I'm like, "Oh no, that's crazy." But luckily, I knew how things were, kind of how things generally worked. But what was challenging is I was playing catch up in a unit that didn't have a manager, and I had maybe about a month to do that before like the CLIA auditors came. So this is like the CMS, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That's the regulatory agency that kind of ensures that you are, with your clinical laboratory is up to par with the regulations. That's the CLIA regulations. So that was challenging, but it wasn't impossible, I think kind of taking this question and kind of applying it to the FDA part is what I said I liked the most about my current job, about being intellectually curious and whatever, like that kind of stuff. I really love that. I wasn't really able to do that at the FDA. It was very, very regimen. What did the company do this or did they not? Did they, like that's, it was kind of, that kind of took that out of me. Like there was no ability for me to really be creative, I guess, maybe for certain types of submissions that were new types of submissions. But for the typical submissions that you can get, those are more like devices that they're trying to compare to a previously marketed device and show that they're substantially equivalent, and therefore they can market it. So like with that being the majority of the reviews, you can't really go outside of the box with thinking. Another thing that was challenging with FDA is a lot of those timelines and those are actually hard deadlines. Like you have to be reviewing things within the X number of days for that type of submission because it's written into the law, like here's an example. For example, like that device thing, the device submission that I told you about, the one where they're trying to compare its substantial equivalence to another device, that's a 90-day total timeline. And, there are times where you punt it back to the sponsor or the applicant and they come back, but 90 days of FDA time. If you don't finish that review in the 90 days, the company can market it
any way they want.
Another thing is there's another type of submission called an IDE. That's an investigational device exemption. That's a company's application to do a clinical trial for a medical device. So all they have to do is demonstrate safety, but that, that's a lot of, in order to do to get approved, but that's a 30-day time. And you think that's a lot of time. That's not a lot of time because these are calendar days. These are not weekdays. These are not business days. So you lose 2 days every week is the weekend. Holidays, if people are on vacation, those are lost time, So then with 30 days, if you don't have any substantial reasons for them to not do that clinical study, they can do the clinical study, and it's like, whoa, so that was a really tough part about that job. But, they're making, they're, since I left, they've been able to hire more people. There was a new law or a new amendment that got passed that enabled them to hire more people. So, with that, presumably workload per person should go down. So it wouldn't be that we would have
Right.
15 to 20 submissions in our queue. It might be 10 to 15, and then it's more manageable. But anyway, yeah. So I guess I took that question and turned it on.
No, it's totally fine, totally fine. And I think you bring up a very interesting point, especially about federal government. When we think about it, there could be the perception that federal government takes a long time, things are very slow. And I think a lot of it's from, and you're a good example of this, the hiring practice of it, that it took 10 months for you to get hired. And it's just like, well, that's just how the whole kind of, work is. And turns out that no, once you're starting to work there, it's then things are rapid fire, lots to learn in a quick amount of time. A lot of things have to be done in a short amount of time, because of, different types of regulations or laws, or just the way that the office kind of works and stuff like that. So I think it is interesting to hear that side of it too, is like, there is an immense amount of kind of pressure to get things done in a short amount of time, and still make sure that it's covering everything that you need to. So.
Yeah. And, that was my experience at FDA. There are other people on my team who absolutely loved it. That was right up their alley. I enjoyed parts of it. I didn't enjoy it all, but there are people who really, that's just the way they think. They're regulators. They're very good at that. And, like you spend maybe 3 to 5 years at the FDA, you get the experience that you need. And people actually get poached by industry, and they end up going, and they get like 2 people on our team. One person became the director of regulatory affairs for a company, probably making $250,000 a year. You know what I mean? And then another guy on our team, he got hired by a law firm, and he was making $220,000. He's also doing law school, so I don't know how he's going to do all of this at the same time. But anyway, Sorry.
So I'll go back to this. I guess now talking about like what is like a typical day or work week look like for you? Like how is your time filled during the week?
Yeah, I mean, so I get in early, mostly before everyone. I love it. So I get in around 6:45, 7 into the office. I'm there for about an hour, and then people start to kind of trickle in. I like it because it's good time for me to check emails. If I'm curious about some question that I might have had, I can look at data sets and plot them. And by the time people come in, I can say, hey, what do you think about this data set? Or how I analyzed it or whatever. And then they look at it. They may poo-poo it, they may not. So that, and then when people come in, you just get the day started. So depending on what the tasks are, so like we have things called proficiency testing. That's you participate in an external. It's basically you're getting tested by an external entity and saying, hey, you're good to do continued testing for all these different types of methods or analyses or whatever you're looking for. Okay. So we have them at different times throughout the year, and they're kind of overlapping, so keep making sure that we're organized for that. That's managing the instrument, preventive maintenance, and if there are any repairs that need to be done, like for example, one of our freezers, just stopped, it was on its way out. It just stopped working. And we had a feeling it might stop working overnight. And I didn't want us to have that phone call in the middle of the night saying, your freezer temperature is below its set limits. So, you got to move that stuff from that freezer into another minus 80 freezer. And, it ended up going out of business basically overnight. So it's good we did that. But it's like little things like that, Also preparing for, there's a lot of my job that deals with corrective action, preventive action type of things. So it's all quality assurance type of, and when I came out of grad school, that's another thing that, I had a culture shock coming from an academic lab to a government lab, where it's like, now you're in a government lab that is, pretty regulated, it's a regulated thing, but in academia, it's like not like that. It's like, I was like, why is there a quality assurance team watching how I'm doing stuff? I'm doing it right. What are you talking about? It's like, but that's just, that was just my way of thinking, I guess, at the time. And I guess working at the FDA actually changed that mindset. So now I actually really enjoy doing the quality assurance type of stuff. A lot of that has to do with analyzing kind of historical data, comparing it, what you can do, is what you can do given what you have. But a typical day, that's kind of like, that's it. It's also, being also a manager, you're also kind of, you're managing people's personalities as well, and
Sure.
how they connect with each other or how they may not connect sometimes. And I think it's that part, it can be a little challenging, but I think I'm doing okay with it. It's like, I'm crossing fingers, but
There you go.
but yeah, but a lot of that, it is managing people, and it's, above and, I don't want to say below, but the different levels.
Up and down. Yep.
Up and down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And also managing the schedule of who gets to use your projector. Also,
Yeah.
I guess.
No one's allowed to use a projector. It's got to be in my possession.
There you go. So,
Oh, yeah.
all right, cool. All right, so let me, let's see. Okay. So thinking about going back to your time of like before coming to Bloomberg, while you're at Bloomberg, and then even when you left, how did the expectations, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how did the expectations, the plans of what you want to do kind of change along the way? And if there are changes, what advice would you give to students that may go on a different path than they intended?
Yeah, that's a good question, because that is exactly like my life, like through grad school, I changed my mind, good amount. Even in undergrad, like I've changed my major at least 4 times, maybe 3 times, but either way, still, I'm pretty decisive about certain things, but I guess when it comes to what comes next, that's where I might be, I would say I'm open-minded,
Right.
I'm open to possibilities. I never really had like, I'm going to be a faculty and that's all I ever want, that kind of thing. For me, I kind of go where the work interests me, where I can feel like I can make an impact. I can really, I can have fun and scratch that intellectual curiosity itch, that's maybe, and I guess, like the second part of your question is, what worked for me is when I was at JHBSPH, I'm sorry, while I was at the school, I did a lot of things outside of the lab, and I mentioned that during my intro. I didn't just do my thesis and that was it. I was heavily involved in student assembly, the last position being president of student assembly, but I did, other student groups as well. And a lot of them, a couple of them were actually like tri-school. So I got to interact with people at different schools at different levels, and it really helped me beef up or build the non-technical skills, a lot, and then that being, managing people or managing personalities or interpersonal dynamics, managing projects. Like, when I was doing student assembly stuff, I was overseeing, I think it was like 8 committees at the time. It probably has since changed since then. And it was like 40 or 50 people total, it's like, so being able to manage all those different things and also actively participate in the events, it really helped me be able to kind of bounce back, kind of have that resilience bounce back, in addition to doing my thesis. And I really think that is a good marketable skill. Like, so I don't know if the students here are PhD students or they're, or master students or DRP students. I don't know the background, but what was my point? PhD students, right? Yes. So when you're in your PhD program, you're doing a thesis, and that is like your lifeblood. That is what you're doing all day, every day. Okay, I'm a PhD student. Thanks, Caroline. So I don't, when I went to postdoc interviews and stuff, they had me give a 45-minute presentation about my thesis. That's what I knew. That's exactly what, but when I was interviewing at the job for the contractor job at the DC government, they asked me, "Oh, tell me about your thesis." And I said, "Oh, I have a PowerPoint here ready to go if you want to talk about it." They said, "No, give me 30 seconds to 60 seconds about what you did." And ever since then,
3 years into 30 seconds. There you go.
3 hours in it. It was 6 years for me, 6.5.
Oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So in, so I missed it. I'm sorry. I lost my train of
Oh,
thought.
just
Um,
interviewing for the
Yes, interview. Yeah,
office.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that was a big part of my life. And they wanted in 30 seconds to 60 seconds. And after that, I never, and any of the interviews afterwards, I never was asked that question again.
Wow.
Yeah. So really it's, like it, yeah, obviously the technical stuff, it matters. But what they actually asked me when I was interviewing for the manager positions is those non-technical skills. How did you manage people who are resistant to change? How do you manage people who may not like your leadership style, or may have issues with other people on the team? How do you manage multiple projects at the same time? And then
Right.
I had answers to a lot of those. I wouldn't say all
Yeah.
of them, because
Right.
sometimes they're tough, but I think having those other experiences outside of my thesis work really helped me
Mhm.
personally answer the questions that were asked of me for particularly those supervisor, those manager positions. Yeah.
Right. And I guess at the time that you were doing the non-academic activities at the school, it was because you were interested in that, because
Yes.
you wanted to stretch yourself, not because you said, well, if I do this, this is going to help out with answering the the interpersonal skill questions during an interview. It was because you were interested in that, but
Yeah.
it was afterwards you could go back and reflect on it and say, you could pull from those experiences as a way to give the example.
Exactly. Yeah, Paul, I was not that deliberate when I was doing these things. I was like, how is this going
Yeah,
to help me 5 years from now? No, I
right,
wasn't. I didn't know.
right, right.
But it is because yeah, absolutely. I picked what I was interested in, and I met many cool people in the process. People all over the school that I never would have met had I just been in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology doing my
Mhm.
thesis research. Probably never would have met you, Paul. I have no idea.
Probably, maybe,
Probably.
yeah, possible,
uh,
yeah, yeah. So, okay, so let me go to this question here. So, was there ever like a career setback or something that you later realized was an advantage, and how did you kind of leverage that? So, something
hmm.
that you felt that, at the time looking at it, it wasn't looking favorable, but in hindsight, looking back on it, it's something that you're kind of glad that you went through.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I just thought of a good answer for that. It
Cool.
was while I was doing my postdoc interviews. There
Mhm.
was one person at the NIH, National Cancer Institute, that if he gave me a postdoc position in his lab, I would have been like, "Yep, doing it," and and then that would have been my life for 5 years, after grad school. And so the setback was he didn't offer me that position, and I was, I wouldn't say I was crushed, because I was looking at other options as well. But, for me, that kind of said, hey, maybe I don't need to do a postdoc, because if I wanted to do a postdoc, that's where I needed or would have really wanted to do it, But so I got a couple other offers, and I said, let me see how this contractor potential promotion may play out in DC government. So I ended up, turning down those other couple of offers for doing a postdoc. And it ended up being an advantage. It really helped me with my career trajectory, like it changed, and since then I've had 4 different positions, and it's
Right.
every time I'm kind of jumping a little bit, I guess a little bit higher, I guess. I don't,
Yeah.
so, you know, um,
No,
so
I think that's great. I mean, I think it's that idea is, oftentimes I think students can get maybe very locked into a path of what they should be doing and how to do it. And academia seems to have a very deliberate path of do your PhD, do your dissertation, do a
mhm,
postdoc, you become an assistant professor, work to get tenure, work to do the publications, go to the committee and to get there. But it sometimes it's when you get the unexpected no, it turns into potentially the opportunity to test drive something else and see kind of how that goes.
yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
So I guess the one more question that I have, and see if anybody else has any more after this. So if we were really kind of thinking about how everything that you've done so far in public health. So obviously, it's been a lot in a short amount of time. And like you say, you've had 4 jobs, I guess almost in 4 years, right? Since 2019.
Yeah.
And this idea of job hopping too often. So like people are like, oh, you should stay at a job for a long time and it looks bad if you leave a job. What do you say to that?
I get it.
Uh-huh.
I felt that internally, I get it. I definitely get that. But I think that's just, we're in a different world now. I think things are just different now. Where now it's less unacceptable. Cause I think like maybe my parents' generation, I think, my parents have been they were with their employer for 20 plus years, I can't imagine being somewhere for that long. I feel like
Right.
that's tough for me to do.
Yeah.
Even if the benefits are amazing, it's kind of like, it's one of those things, yeah. So like, I guess there is always, like if I were to apply for another job after this, I'm worried that, I am worried that, they might think you're kind of a flight risk. Why are you hopping
Mhm.
around so much, and like, I don't know. I mean, it's one of those, it's a really good question that I don't really have a good answer for.
Right.
Luckily, it hasn't hurt me too much. I think something that really I would strongly recommend is do not burn bridges.
Yeah.
Because
I was just gonna say.
that is the reason why I have most of the jobs. One as a not connections. It's like kind of like people that I knew tangentially or haven't, like the person, my tennis buddy, who told me about the FDA position. I haven't talked to him since high school, and he just saw me on Facebook. We see each other post, but that's about it. But also, I didn't, when I left the DC job for the FDA job, I didn't burn bridges when I left. I could have been
Right.
like, y'all are horrible. I hate this place. Like I'm out of here, drop the mic. And then I wouldn't be able to come
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and they were constantly reaching out to you saying, hey, this is coming up. Hey, this is coming up. And they're like, hey, your former boss left you, it's like, so it's that the maintaining the respectful communication with the people that you work with or work for is hugely important.
yeah, it's a small world depending on, like our world, pretty small. Like it's when I was applying and when I interviewed in person for the contractor job at DC, towards the end, I was just taking a tour and then I met the public health lab director and that he said, I know you from somewhere, from some conference or something. And I said, I don't have an answer for you. And he said, start naming all your bosses or whatever. So I named one person. I did a fellowship at the CDC and I named him without my former, boss or mentor or whatever. And he said, oh, I'm very good friends with that guy. And, and then one of the other person, the hiring manager also was friends with my former boss at the
Uh-huh.
CDC.
Yeah.
And I never listed this person as a reference, but they contacted him. You know what I mean? So again,
Mhm.
I didn't burn any bridges with that. That could have really been bad if I
Yeah.
did have a bad experience there or whatever,
Right.
So it just people, but the thing is people know each other. And
Yeah.
now actually my former boss, who was he ended up taking another job in Texas and I see him on conference calls, the same conference
Mhm.
calls. So we're in the same world, we didn't,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I do think, and I think it's an important point to kind of say is that the norm now is that changing jobs is okay. Like changing jobs, and not feeling like you have to stay somewhere for a very long time, or that if you commit to
Mhm.
this job, you're going to be there for a number of years, unless you're very happy with it and you're satisfied with what you're doing. But also to knowing that when you're changing jobs, you're increasing your level of responsibility, or increasing the impact that you can have on the work that you're doing, and that's an important thing to remember as well.
Yeah, and also another thing that maybe you didn't mention is that you're also increasing your salary potential as well. You know what I mean? Every time you're kind of moving, you get a little bit more,
Yep.
and that is certainly the case for me. And yeah, I think, I guess if you stay in an organization, you might get maybe 2 or 3% more every year or whatnot, maybe 5%, I don't know. But like with, changing the jobs, you end up getting a little bit more than that, so it's like, yeah, I guess that's another thing to add on to that. A
Right.
practical like life
Yeah.
thing, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. Well,
'Cause
and
I'm not,
just that
sorry.
the idea of moving up, you have to move out. So it's like
Yeah.
you move out of something in order to move up into the, a similar space that you want to be in.
Right.
Definitely. Cool. Want to see if anybody has questions. If you want to just put them in the chat or raise your hand or anything like that. Happy to hear from anybody that might have a question here while Justin is still joining us. I don't see anything for right now.
I mean, I could chime in real quick and say something that
Yeah, I was going to say. Yep.
Yeah, I recommend if I remember doing, I can't remember what it was through a Hopkins. It was like one-on-one interview. I can't remember exactly what the event was, but I was talking to, that was at the time I was at the FDA, but people were, I think one thing they want to go federal government. I said, you should consider local government because, there are positions that do need to be filled and you can have a lot of impact there at the local level. And then, you eventually move to the national level. Another thing to think about is if you see a contractor position, that is a great foot in the door. It was certainly for me. It was certainly for several people who are formerly contractors. Actually, a lot of people in the current job that I'm in now, they started off as interns and then they became contractors after they finished their school. And then they became promoted as full-time FTEs, full-time employees, government employees. So these are things, local level, you really, you can really make an impact there. You can really learn a lot from the people there. And I feel like it's more, I don't know, for me, I felt very like I was much more like impacting the immediate community that I'm in, and at the federal level, I was just sitting in my basement desk the whole time, you know what I mean? And it was, that's a different experience. I was at the FDA, but still,
right.
I guess that's just something I didn't mention before. And I think that's something important to take away. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very good advice to do in terms of the contractor route, knowing that is a way to do it. Sometimes the contractor route comes about through somebody reaching out to you. So it then, speaks to me the idea of making sure you have documents ready to be able to share, putting a useful LinkedIn profile to be available for people to kind of look at and define and things like that. Because if you put enough kind of, there, people might notice at some point, or the more people you make aware, then they can know about something as well that comes across their desk that they think that you might be good for.
Yeah, like just because something's not your dream job, you may not even know what your dream job is. It's like I thought I wanted to be a physician after I left undergrad, and then I went and did a fellowship at the CDC, and that changed my whole professional journey. I ended up doing a PhD instead of an MD. Like you may think you have a dream job, and I'm not, and you may end up getting that. But for me, I never really had one, I think. And I'm just looking to be happy and enjoy what I do, and I think I found it right now. So that's
great.
That's
awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, I want to say thank you, Justin.
What's Caroline saying? Let's see.
Hadn't really considered a government position, so definitely.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, I know you said you're an MPH student. So hopefully I was able to help. I think a lot of my experiences probably might help people who are more lab centric, I guess. But I'm glad you took away something from that, Caroline. I appreciate the words. Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the office, myself, and Olivia and Jeanette, and everybody, we appreciate you having you here today. And we encourage everybody to come to our remaining 2 days of the Career Academy. So we'll have things about writing tomorrow, resume writing, personal statements, mission statements, things like that. And so hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow at our next session as well. So thank you, Justin, for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. And if anyone wants to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn. So thanks, Paul.
No problem.
Nice meeting everyone. Take care.
See you.